About a week ago, I built this disc sander. And I'm not saying that because it's the best disc sander on YouTube. I'm also saying that because one of the processes I needed to do was to drill a very accurate hole right in the center of the disc so I could fit it under the shaft. But I had a really hard time doing that because unfortunately my drill press only drills about 5 inches away from this post, and so I wasn't able to drill in the center of a 12-inch disc. So I built myself a mobile drill press. Now, I wasn't really a big fan of a lot of the versions I saw here on YouTube because most of them have an integrated drill, and I didn't want to dedicate this drill to this project, so I decided to take this chuck out of this old Black & Decker drill. Black & Deckers are well known for breaking pretty quickly, and usually it's the gears inside, so the motor and the chuck are both still good. So I took the chuck out and I cut the gear off so that I could use it for this project. So that's interesting. That is all there is for the bearing. I decided to use a bunch of 3/8 and 1/2 inch plywood for this project because it's what I already had on hand, but you can kind of use any thickness that you want. The sides of the apparatus are made mostly out of the 3/8 inch plywood, and it's going to have 2 layers on it. The outside is going to be the housing, and the inside is going to contain the runners. Making the runners is actually really easy. All I do is I cut even spacing on the left and right side of each piece, giving me a piece of waste in the center, and that's going to be my runner. I didn't have a piece of plywood thick enough for the bottom portion of the housing that holds the drill chuck, so I glued 2 pieces together, and the top portion can just be a single piece of 3/8 inch plywood. I need to drill a very accurate hole between the top housing and the bottom housing that holds the chuck, so I decided to tape them together so that I could get my references correct. The hole I drilled for the bottom portion of the housing could be a little bit loose because I'm going to use the kerf of my blade later to make everything nice and tight, but the top hole doesn't have any clamping system associated with it, so I had to drill a relatively tight fitting hole on there, and as the drill spins in the future, it's going to bore it out and slip just nicely like a bearing should. The best way I've found to create a clamping force against the bearing in a way that stays accurate is just to cut a small piece out of the front of the housing, and the kerf of the blade creates just enough of a space so that when you screw everything back together, it stays incredibly accurate and square. What I needed to do was drill a very accurate hole through the flange and into the housing, and the top of the flange needs to be drilled a little bit wider so that the threads will slip, and then I can just countersink the top. Okay, this is the moment of truth where hopefully everything will come together perfectly and you'll see kind of what I've been planning for the last couple of hours. Or this entire video is going to end up in my failed projects folder on my hard drive along with the most recent couch project and the 7 rubber chickens project. Well, I'm 30 seconds in and I've already screwed something up. Hold on. Now what I'm trying to do is put the sides on that's going to hold the runner in place, but I put glue right in the center where that runner is, so if I had left that there, it would have glued my runner in place, meaning it would have just been thicker plywood, I guess. I'm glad I caught that in time. I was planning on leaving the runner in place after I tacked everything into place, but there really was no reason to, so I didn't want any more mistakes, so I took it out while everything dried. Because of the interesting shape of this chuck, I had to have a very accurate spacing between the upper and lower parts of the housing that hold the chuck. So I cut these thin strips of plywood just to space these apart a little bit. And then I can start putting the flange on, and this part worked perfectly. There we go. Now I needed to attach the runners to the housing, and I wanted to make sure it was as square as possible, so I used this offsetting block, and I also decided to space it up a little bit, partially to make room for the chuck, and I figured if the runners extended out the bottom a little farther, it would reduce some of the slack that I might have inside the slot. Now, if you're wondering why I decided to use Titebond 3 in this project, the honest truth is I thought it was Titebond Original, and so I guess now this project is waterproof. Now that I have the final dimension of my runners, I decided to cut everything flush on the table saw. I also used this as an opportunity to cut all of the brackets that I needed to evenly space the outside housing. I also cut 2 extra pieces to connect to the inside of the wall so that it can hold the runners in place during use. Okay, this is the front, or the user's side, and this is the back here. I want this piece to be right here, and this is where the drill is going to be chucked in. And there is plenty of room to work the chuck, but I want a little bit of extra room for my fingers. So I'm going to mark out a spot to cut away. There we go. I had originally cut a much smaller piece for the foot here, but I decided to go with this much bigger one because I wanted more clamping space. Obviously, if you wanted a much smaller footprint, you could just use a smaller board. And since this piece is only attached with screws, you can always change it in the future. Okay, this thing is getting really close to done. One of the issues that I have with it so far is that it sticks, which is good. That means my tolerances are nice and tight, and they seem to be referencing off of all the surfaces, so that's working out fantastic. Now what I need to do is I'm going to take the whole thing apart, and I've already sanded some of this to about 120 off camera. I'm going to sand all the way up to an 800 to get these runners to move nice and smooth, so that way I don't have anything catching. And I'm also going to take all the moving parts and I'm going to put some paste finishing wax on it. I might put this in a couple other spots too because it looks really nice too. So let's get this thing apart and sand it and wax it, and then I can put the finishing touches on. I'm not going to subject you to all of the sanding I did for this project. Now obviously I'm deciding to put a paste finishing wax on the inside of the runners because it's going to help them slip inside their slots. But I also decided to use the same finishing wax on the outside of the piece, mostly because I just wanted something on the outside of it to make it a little bit more durable, but I didn't want to wait several days for some sort of film finish to dry. So it was sort of a no-nonsense way of getting this project done. Alright, this is my favorite part. Final assembly. Okay, I lied. I can't get the bit in, so this is not quite final assembly. Man, you really just don't want to cut through that. Alright. This is why I hate this drill press. Okay. Okay, let's see. So, if anything, it's actually leaning toward the camera a little bit, which means the bit is drilling in that sort of direction just by the tiniest bit. Let me drill something thicker and see if I can exaggerate the cut. So the vertical is off a little bit, and the horizontal is definitely off a little bit. To solve the alignment issue that I had and make this drill precise holes, I decided to give a little bit of a relief inside my bracket piece, and then I cut a few pieces of aluminum shimming and shimmed out one of the sides of the shaft. And then I was ready for another test cut. So I overshot a little bit in the Z-axis, but the X-axis needs to move over just a little bit farther, which is actually really nice because what that means is all I have to do is turn that, and that should actually solve the problem. Alright, let's check this one more time. It should be good now. Yes! That is good. Alright, let's check the side. Yep. Yes! Perfect. Well, thank you all for watching. I thoroughly enjoyed building this project. If I was ever going to do this project again, I decided there was two things that I would love to change. I don't have any way of drilling angles, and so what I would like to do is add some sort of a trunnion system into the bottom. I didn't want to do that in this one because it was already complicated enough, and I've never built one, so I wanted to run through just the 90-degree version of it first because that's really all I need in my shop. But I'd love to be able to do angles. The other thing that I thought about changing was adding some sort of a lever here. So if this was up here, you could just lever it down, because one of the biggest issues I was noticing while drilling is as I'm drilling down, I have a tendency to push a lot on the handle. So I have to really focus on pushing straight down and letting the tool do the work in terms of guiding it. I was having a little bit of trouble doing that. I got really good at it by the end, but if I could add a lever, that would just eliminate that problem altogether. So this thing was a lot of fun. Let me know if this is something you guys would ever want to build. I highly recommend doing one of these if you have a wood shop. Having a mobile drill press is so helpful when you have to drill a hole in something wider than a drill press can operate, and that way you don't have to do the guesswork of trying to drill accurately outside of that situation. So let me know what you think of the project. Thank you all for watching. Catch y'all next time.